and decided to engage in negotiations again.
Again, what is your preferred outcome?
My preferred
What do
outcome
you want to see happen?
is diplomacy.
What? No, that's not an outcome. That's a process. What do you want to see happen? After your diplomacy or after what is your preferred outcome? That Iran has or does not have a nuclear weapon?
Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
Okay, so you also agree with Donald Trump. We have agreed here. Everyone agrees with Donald Trump here.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Second Take, where we tune into CNN so you don't have to. Scott Jennings is joining us again, having just returned from his visit to Israel, and he's taking his place on the panel of CNN's Newsnight with Abby Phillip. Today, I've got some clips focusing on the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran. However, as expected, the discussion quickly veers into anti-Trump antics, which never fail to amuse me because I end up saying some variation of this in nearly every video on CNN. It's not intentional, it wouldn't matter if it were, but it consistently ends up being my takeaway. Anyway, what we're about to see is Scott Jennings methodically handling a panel that's either emotional, misguided, or just plain dishonest. As usual, there's only one person presenting the facts with a working brain, and it's definitely not Dan Coe, whose name I barely knew until now, but he's really off the rails this time. You'll see what I mean. So let's watch as Scott Jennings takes charge, cuts through the chaos, and leaves the CNN panel floundering to form a single coherent thought. Spoiler, they don't manage it. Let's dive in.
With you, you're just back from being in Israel. You got caught in this and had a difficult time getting out. When you look at what's happening between Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard, what do you make of this back and forth that is happening? Is it something to really be paying attention to, or is it a sideshow that doesn't matter to you?
I think it's a sideshow because the commander-in-chief believes what he believes, and he believes what is true, which is that they have made and enriched unprecedented amounts of uranium. You wouldn't need that much if you weren't planning to build a nuclear weapon. And if they decided to build one, they'd be weeks away from doing it. Plus, for 20 years, Donald Trump has been saying we cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So, he has very clear-eyed views on this, very consistent views on it. And he knows that it's just not possible for us to have peace in the Middle East if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. On top of that, if I could just comment on what Anderson said regarding Israeli resolve, I completely agree. That's what the sentiment is on the ground. Before the Iran war started, I was moving around the country, meeting with people. The resolve among Israelis to defeat the Iranian terror proxies following October the 7th is extremely high, even after all this time. And you throw on top of it now this war with Iran. This has been 20 years in the making. They can't have a neighbor like this who believes that Israel should be completely and totally eradicated from the map and that every Jewish person should be murdered. What they lived through on October the 7th and what they lived through with the prospect of Iran having a nuclear weapon, it's just not livable. It's not possible. This can only end one way. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And if the people of Iran would take this opportunity, they should rise up and toss these butchers out and get themselves a new government.
Dan, what do you make of this? The way that Donald Trump is basically saying, look, I'm giving myself up to 2 weeks. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a full 2 weeks. It could be any moment now for all we know. But do you think he's listening more to sort of the MAGA megaphone holders who, like Steve Bannon, met with him, and then after that he said, look, I'm going to give a 2-week pause because Bannon has been very clear he is against going into Iran using U.S. military force, over his, though, head of intelligence?
Yeah, I think it's a very simple question. Where should Americans go for evidence of the president's ability to manage this crisis effectively? Look at his foreign policy record. He promised that we would have peace in Russia and Ukraine within 24 hours. It's still going. He said he'd end the Gaza war, and instead he tweets out a video of him shirtless on the Gaza Strip. He said he'd end forever wars. They're still going. He said Vice President Harris would start World War III. He's on the brink of starting a much larger role. On top of that, he's ousted his intelligence director and instead, as you mentioned, relying on right-wing media sources for his guidance. And I wanted to point out one other thing. Amidst all of this, amidst a monumental decision to put military in harm's way, he calls a press conference about a flagpole on the South Lawn. If President Biden had done that, every right-wing media would be questioning his mental acuity. Now there's only one person whose mental acuity we should be questioning.
Are you for or against us keeping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon?
I'm absolutely against Iran getting a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so you agree with Donald Trump then?
I agree that we need to prevent a nuclear weapon from Iran happening, and I think that we need thoughtful leadership internally, not a Secretary of State who's moonlighting as a national security advisor.
So this is the government we have. This is the government the American people elected.
Do you feel confident that the intelligence operation is working well right now inside the White House?
Yes, I think.
When the president is calling out his intelligence director, when there is no national security advisor,
Yeah, there is. Marco Rubio is National Security
And
Advisor.
Secretary of State. You think he's doing both jobs effectively?
I think he's the most effective cabinet member that we have. Right now, this White House is clear-eyed about the threat. They are as close to Israel
Clear-eyed
as you
would
can
not
be.
mean that he is building flagpoles in the middle of this, going golfing and whiffing on a shot.
You're obsessed with this flagpole issue. What you should be obsessed with
Yes, because I'm obsessed
is the
with
fact that we're on the brink here of remaking the Middle East and making Western civilization safe and protecting our
I am
special
obsessed
ally
with
Israel.
a
That's what you
president.
should be worried
I am
about.
obsessed with a president making sure the military is not put in harm's way, and I am
What does
also
that mean?
obsessed that when they come back, there isn't a
does
VA
that
with
mean?
83,000 cuts that he's also proposing.
I don't understand harm's way.
I get it, it's challenging, so I totally understand if you missed it. Did anyone catch Dan Coe speaking? You know, the guy sitting to Scott's left? If you didn't manage to, really, I get it. I even envy you. He's not captivating, humorous, or likable. He's just forgettable. Think of him as human wallpaper. You won't hear his name tossed around with dull icons like Bayer Marid. But if you watch his clips, I think we found ourselves a wild card. I've made over 100 videos for CNN Newsnight, and I'm pretty sure I haven't mentioned him until now. But today, we're spotlighting this man, let's be clear. Not for bringing anything meaningful to the table, but because in one area he's top-notch, his obsession with Trump. Every time he appears, it's like, all right, today's the day I'm going to bring down Trump. The subject doesn't matter, be it taxes, Israel, or even the weather. It always circles back to Trump. And every time, despite his frustration, Trump remains unscathed, and so his animosity grows and his focus narrows even more. If CNN had a betting pool on who's most likely to have a meltdown on air, Dan Coe would be the clear frontrunner. And you all know I adore Scott Jennings, so it's not my place to advise him on his choices. But because I care, I must say that if I were him, I'd ask to switch seats. Honestly, I felt more at ease when Scott was in Israel. Now, he's next to what seems like the furious offspring of David Pakman and Brian Tyler Cohen. You know I don't usually brag, but if that level of deep, expertly crafted analysis doesn't persuade you to subscribe, I don't know what will. I challenge you to find another conservative political commentator who can provide you with such sharp insights. All right, back to it.
And from what we're hearing, the first night in the opening strikes, they took out 15 nuclear scientists to ensure that their knowledge as well as the technology were gone, so they couldn't reconstitute the program the next day after sort of it happened. So it's clear that there's a threat. From what I'm told, the administration basically held the Israelis back. The strike was supposed to take place in the middle of May. And going back, it was the vice president of the DNI who had cautioned the president to consider negotiations. President Trump said, okay. They tried it for about 60 days. The Iranians have been giving us the runaround for the last 2 decades on this.
That's the thing. Trump gave him 60 days. He told them back at the end of April, you got 60 days. And they didn't want to deal. And they're not going to want to deal now. These conversations going on with the Europeans, it's all just a runaround. It's a stall tactic.
But if that's
they have no intention of being a peaceful country. Death to America, death to Israel, killing Americans, proxies that they prop up and fund, killing Israelis and killing Jews every day. These people, and if a woman shows a strand of hair in Iran, they blind her. The way they treat their own people, do you think they're going to wake up when they say, you know what? We're going to be nice now. No possible way. None.
Then why
Zero.
was the Trump administration scheduling negotiations on the Iran nuclear deal as of Sunday? Why wasn't all of the stuff that's happening right now the Trump administration's idea before Israel struck Iran? They
gave them 60 days. They said in April.
They
you
had
have 60
negotiations
days.
that were scheduled on Sunday that were canceled. What happened to that?
Because
that
they
was
were-
an
because they
indictment.
were-
Are you more upset that they canceled the negotiations
I'm
or that they
upset
enriched
that
the
this-
uranium to the point that it could be days away from a breakout point?
I'm upset that this administration does not have the reins on anything. They are being led because at the bottom line is up until this Sunday, they were willing to negotiate with Iran. Now, I know to your point, Marco Rubio is nowhere to be found. It was Steve Witkoff who's taking the lead on these negotiations. So maybe this is an indictment on their assessment of his ability to see these negotiations through.
What do you want to see happen? What is your preferred outcome?
I would like to see diplomacy. This administration is
With
the
who?
same
Iran?
one. This administration is the one that backed out of the JCPOA in 2017, and now
that allowed them to enrich uranium.
Well, they were adhering to it, and so they backed out. Now we don't have the leverage. This administration
We
came
have
in.
leverage.
You know what's
This
funny?
administration came in and decided to engage in negotiations again.
Again, what is your preferred outcome?
My preferred
What do
outcome
you want to see happen?
is diplomacy.
What? No, that's not an outcome. That's a process. What do you want to see happen? After your diplomacy or after what is your preferred outcome? That Iran has or does not have a nuclear weapon?
Iran does not have nuclear weapons.
Okay,
We
so you
don't
also
want
agree with
them
Donald Trump.
to not
Good.
have nuclear
We have
weapons.
agreed here. Everyone agrees with Donald Trump.
I'm jumping around a bit here, but in the initial clip I shared, Tulsi Gabbard's name came up, and she's been criticized repeatedly on CNN over the past few weeks. I haven't commented much since it's typical for CNN to do this, but I think Laura's question is valid. So let's dissect the facts and determine if the two allegations I've heard hold water. The first claim is about a disagreement between Trump and Gabbard over Iran's nuclear capabilities. Tulsi told Congress that Iran hadn't resumed its nuclear weapons program, which would require the Supreme Leader's official authorization. Then Trump contradicted her, stating Iran was just weeks away from having sufficient enriched uranium for a bomb. The media jumped on this as if there was a significant public falling out. However, they're discussing two separate aspects. Tulsi is focused on intent, while Trump is emphasizing capability. In reality, Tulsi later agreed that Iran is dangerously close and must be stopped. So, regarding the first claim, no, there's no real rift here. This is just CNN and other liberal mainstream media doing what they're known for, exaggerating minor differences and turning them into a tabloid conflict. The other rumor I've heard is that Tulsi Gabbard is being sidelined. This is a more complex issue. Tulsi hasn't taken part in crucial briefings on Iran, and Trump has been notably frustrated with her over that Hiroshima video. Did you see it? I thought it was well done and respect her perspective, but understandably Trump was upset over the possibility of the media using it to spin a story about his policies bringing us close to nuclear war. There are also several reports from insiders suggesting she's more focused on her brand than the plan. As always, I'm skeptical of what insiders claim, but I'll accept it, I suppose. For this claim, yes, there seems to be genuine tension at the moment. Her role seems to be diminishing, yet overall, she's still part of the team. They agree on policy, and she supports Trump on Iran, which is probably typical for any administration. Trump's just more candid about his feelings, so I don't find it exceptionally unusual. In summary, the media is blowing the rift out of proportion. While there's some internal frustration, it's not a political split, just a bit of messaging friction rather than disagreement on the mission. It's great to have Scott back, and he delivered precisely what we expect. He was well prepared, stayed calm, and outperformed a panel more interested in drama than in genuine substance. He didn't have to shout or showboat. I'd love to know your thoughts on the president's recent actions. I expect a variety of opinions from a usually unified comment section, which is good because we should talk about it. Also, I want your feedback on the panel discussion, so please share your thoughts in the comments. Anyway, that's it for this video. I aimed for 5K subscribers by the end of July, but I have to be realistic. We're not going to reach that. However, if you've made it this far, I'd really appreciate your support this July for one last push. Let's end strong, and I promise not to bug you about liking and subscribing again. For this month, though, any help would be greatly appreciated. As always, thank you for taking a few minutes to watch my video. It really means a lot, and remember, Jesus loves you. See you all.